Hello, my name is Ole Mark. I am director at the Research Center here at DHI. I have been spending 10 years working with climate change, where the work I do mainly focuses on the impact of climate changes and how the impacts can be mitigated, with special emphasis on the urban flooding. The main challenges cities are facing when we talk about climate change, that's the fact that either they have not been flooded for a long time, so they are ignoring the flood risk they have today, or there's no legislations in their country telling them that they need to prepare for the future and for climate change. Things they need to know, that would be a 100-year storm, a 100-year rainfall, how strong will it be in the future? A storm surge, how much will the mean sea level rise? And how much will the storm surge then increase in levels? And how will the impacts be on the cities? This information is available in some format. Maybe it just needs to be recomputed into a format which is applicable to the local city. The single most important piece of advice I have to cities all over the world who want to look into the future and adapt to climate change, that is that they need to map their risks. They need to know how much will be flooded in the future compared to today, how much will the damages be, and then they need to figure out how much will it cost to mitigate these flood damages which the future will bring. So they basically need to do a cost-benefit analysis between the risk in the future and the investments they need to make in order to reduce the risk. Most of the cities, they don't have a plan, and it might be for, I would say, basically for two reasons. The first reason, there's no law, there's no framework, no legislation telling them that they need to make one. Because as soon as you have some legislation, then you will see people will make it. On the other hand, you will see cities which are ignorant and unaware of the flood risk as they have today. All cities all over the world, they have a flood risk. Somebody has designed the embankments, the pipe systems, whatever it is, for a certain return period. So if somebody has designed the flood infrastructure for a return period of 10 years, well, they have a 10% risk every year of getting flooded. But many cities around the world, they are not aware of the fact, and they simply ignore it because it's a long time since ago they have been flooded. Many cities all over the world and many people, they see adaptation to climate change as something which will have a huge cost to society. They forget the fact that when you do climate adaptation in an intelligent way, there's also a lot of positive benefits, where climate adaptation might be that you establish green areas to reduce the rainfall runoff in the city, and the people get a nice public park, and at the same time it's reducing the flood risk and the flood damages. So when you're dealing with climate change, you basically have a possibility to make climate change projects which has a good return of an investment to society. One example is in Denmark, where they had a couple of houses. The houses was flooded on a frequent basis. And then the municipality, they figured out if they had to get rid of the flooding by use of concrete piles and traditional measures, then it would cost a fortune. Instead, they decided to build a small playground associated with a school. The playground had basins to store the water, and at the same time, the basins act as a recreative environment for the kids in the playground. So in this way, they constructed a playground, and that was the construction cost to reduce the flood risk. When it comes to my research, some of the most interesting findings, that is the fact that all cities all over the world will they have a flood risk. If you have a city, they have designed the drainage system for a return period of 10 years, well, then they have a 10% probability every year to get a flood. What is very interesting in my research is that nearly everywhere all over the world, this flood risk, which always will be there due to the design, it's completely ignored. People, they don't look into the fact we design for a 50-year storm, we'll have a 2% probability that we are going to be flooded every year, but they don't take that risk into account and compute the flood damages and see what they have at risk. When we design flood mitigation measures, we need to be aware of the fact there will always be some risk left. We can design pipes, embankments, and other structural measures which will take a part of the flood risk. We need to be aware of the fact there will always be some flood risk left. The last flood risk we need to handle, and the way we do this is, for instance, by building real-time information systems, so the people will have the information, the emergency responses can be prepared, and in this way we can reduce the flood damages.